Hello, namaskar. Welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, all you have to do is to press that red button on your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free. Would also really appreciate if you could share this video with your friends, your colleagues, and your peers. All right. The Great Nicobar project. It has been in the news recently, both for the right and for the wrong reasons. We know that the government is investing as much as 72,000 crores into this Great Nicobar project. And therefore, it begs the question that why so much of money is going into the project? What is the importance of this project? And even more important, why are so many other people opposed to this project? I'm going to talk about all these aspects in a little detail in this podcast. But know this, the Great Nicobar project is India's version of the Monroe Doctrine. And therefore, it obviously begs the obvious question that what is this Monroe Doctrine, which I will talk about a little bit, and why is this India's version of the Monroe Doctrine? I'm going to talk about that also. So let's start right at the beginning and try and understand a few things before I get down into the nitty-gritty of this Great Nicobar project. Any country, any big country, any great country which has to take itself seriously has to project itself seriously also in terms of power. It's one thing to project a country in terms of empathy, in terms of being sympathetic, empathetic, kind hearted. That's all fine. And we have a share of that. We call ourselves the Vishwaguru. We also are very hospitable people. You know, our concept is that the whole world is like a family to us. We have these Indian concepts, which is fine. And if you think and if you compare yourself, let's say, with America, for instance, there was a time in the 60s and the 70s, even the 80s and the 90s, where, you know, there was a part of America which was always supposed to be this very compassionate place, a beacon of freedom and democracy. It still is. I'm not saying it is not that, but I'm saying those were the impressions which you had of a big country. But these are not enough to just define a big country. And India is a very, very big country. There has to be something else which defines you. There has to be something else which, you know, people understand that, yes, it's a great country, but greatness will always come through power, projection of power. And nothing better illustrates the projection of power than perhaps the Monroe Doctrine, which was the US adopted it in 1823, if I'm not mistaken. That's right, in 1823. And I'll explain it just to you in a couple of lines what this doctrine is all about. The Monroe Doctrine is where, if you remember, that was a time, 1823, that was an era when all these countries were expanding, they were looking for colonies, there was a sense of imperialistic behavior of the big countries. So what America really did in 1823 after it established the Monroe Doctrine, it told especially Europe that the Western Hemisphere, and the Western Hemisphere obviously includes Latin America, Mexico, and all these other countries, that part of the world is out of bounds in terms of colonization or establishing spheres of interest for Europe. Back off, America said. This is our part of the world. We are the predominant power out there. And this is our sphere of influence. This was the Monroe Doctrine, which was established in 1823. And I'm arguing in this podcast that today, that is in 2025, when India is now set to bring about the Great Nicobar project. I'm going to talk of the project also. That is our version of the Monroe Doctrine, because we are telling the world, or especially we are telling all the regional powers in and around the Bay of Bengal, because that is where the play is going to be of this India's version of the Monroe Doctrine. The Great Nicobar project is also, actually, it's a part of the Andaman Nicobar, island chain. That this is our part, this is our sphere of influence, we are the most powerful country in this region, so back off, which is a message which is going to go to all the other countries all around it, Bangladesh, even China for that matter, even a lot of other countries, Southeast Asian countries, that this is our part of the world. Back off means that acknowledge that we are the preeminent power and then deal with us in that way. And to do that, therefore, you have to bring about the Great Nicobar project. It's a very ambitious and a very massive project. I'm going to talk a few points about this project to make you understand that why this becomes so important. But the more important thing is that what is India trying to achieve out there by bringing about its own version of the Monroe Doctrine? Why do they want to project power in the Bay of Bengal in this particular region? Why is India interested in doing that? I'm going to talk about that also. But before I do that, a few quick points, salient points of the Great Nicobar project to make you understand the importance of this project. 72,000 crores is not a small sum of money. It's a huge amount of money, and therefore you would only invest that kind of money when you hope for massive returns, not in the immediate present, but certainly in the future. So, why are we investing, and what are we investing in? First of all, these 72,000 crores. Let's first understand. We are investing these 72,000 crores primarily to make Nicobar, the Great Nicobar project. We are talking of an entire island area into a transshipment area, which means that it becomes the hub in that entire region as a kind of a gateway to all naval traffic, whether it is civilian traffic or it is military traffic. It is the predominant, it is like the Digo Garcia in a certain sense, if you can call it that, of India, that from there, from this transshipment hub, you control the entire area in the Bay of Bengal area from the Nicobar Islands. And to do that, what you really need to do, that you have to develop a massive port. You're going to create a township also out there. You will of course have an international airport also. There are plans for that also, an international airport with a runway which facilitates those big aircraft to land on the runway. Why this becomes very important is because this particular location of the Great Nicobar project is only 900 kilometers away from the Malacca Straits. And know something about the Malacca Straits, which is very, very important, that the Malacca Straits controls or about 25 to 30% of global traffic of the entire ferrying of global trade passes through the Malacca Straits. And what are we hoping to do that? What we are really hoping to do that is that we are trying to then emerge as the predominant power in that region, and also understand this, that at the moment, for instance, Singapore, this offers there's a lot of traffic which goes through Singapore through this Malacca Straits. That's there's a huge amount of traffic, and by creating this hub, we hope to capture almost 25 to 30%, I think, of that traffic, of that Singapore traffic, which goes through that it starts coming our way. Which means that these would be revenues, these would be monies which would be coming into India. And therefore, you could end up by earning as much as 30,000 crores annually income, maybe even more, once it gets going. But that's only part of the story. The real other important part of the story is that the same Great Nicobar project, besides, as I said, creating civilian infrastructure, a naval infrastructure, a port, and for the importance of the Malacca Straits, and we all know the importance of the Malacca Straits and all the recent events which have been going on in the world. We are also planning to develop it into a major naval hub out there, which means that our warships, which means our aircraft carriers, which means our submarines could be docking around that particular region, and which means a power projection in that region, because we already have a very, we have a very strong navy, but there are now plans by 2040 to probably bring in almost to almost have close to about 330 warships in the Indian Navy. That's a huge amount. That's a huge amount. I'm sorry, 230 warships by 2040, and three aircraft carriers. Think about it. That is massive. That is really massive. And therefore, the Great Nicobar project will play a very important and a very key role into this entire force projection, as it were. So then, to summarize this entire thing, what you're really hoping to achieve by in pumping in this kind of money, that is 72,000 crores, is that A, you create the civilian infrastructure, you create a port, you create a transshipment area. Because remember also that entire region is like it's like a convergence of so many trade routes, of so many naval vessels which are plying, merchant ships which are plying around that region. So you are the big daddy, you are the big guns, as it were, of that particular entire area. This is what you hope to achieve. So, besides the civil infrastructure, you are creating a logistical, you are creating a docking facility for your aircraft carriers, for your warships, for your submarines, both civilian and military. They will go hand in hand. That is the importance. And the biggest important thing is that you then get a say in the world traffic which is going through the Malacca Straits. And in the process, you control the entire Bay of Bengal region, which is so very critical to India's aspiration to become a great maritime power. We already are a maritime power, but a great maritime power. The Nicobar project is going to play a very, very pivotal and a very, very important role. So that's the importance of the the Great Nicobar project. Now, that's not the only thing. Let's try and understand what really are the not talked about advantages of this project, things which we are not saying at the moment, things which you have to read between the lines. Along with this project, there is also now talk of developing another project not very far away, but around that particular area, which is known as Project Varsha, which is in a place called Rambili in Andhra Pradesh. There are plans to develop this into a secret submarine base for India. The Chinese already have an island. I think if I'm not mistaken, Hainan. That's if I can remember the name, island as a kind of a secret submarine project, and therefore this is our version of a secret submarine base again in that Bay of Bengal region. And therefore, if this combines with the Great Nicobar project, imagine the force projection, the power projection of India. These two projects are on the anvil. And of course, there are forces out there which want to stymie this project, which want to put the fetters on this project. They don't want this project to go through. And I'll talk a little bit about that also. But really, what I'm really trying to say out there is that this would be this naval force power projection which India will do in combination of the Great Nicobar project and the Rambili or the project Varsha. These are the plans. And why do you need this? You need this because at the end of the day, and I'll come back to the original point which I was making of the Monroe Doctrine, great powers, great powers are become great powers not only through empathy or sympathy or for being compassionate or for helping people, which we did, by the way. We helped the whole world during COVID, as you all know. You are recognized as a great power, but you will ultimately be accepted as a great power only if you have the strength, if you have the power to be a great power. And in today's day and world, it is now absolutely clear that the Navy is a critical component of your projection in a great power. See, land-based armies, artillery, infantry, armored corps, they're all very important. But they are important to that extent within the country or to the borders of a country. But if you want to project your power, then naval power is the way to go. To my mind, it is actually even more important than air power. Air power, of course, is also very critical. But naval projection means that you project your power all over the world. If there's any leaf we have to take from the imperial powers of the 17th, 18th century, 19th century, all these imperial powers, then they establish their supremacy, their power through naval strength. And therefore, naval strength becomes extremely important. And that is the reason why we want to establish our control over this entire Bay of Bengal region and create these hubs in the Great Nicobar and in places like, secret projects, secret submarine bases like Rambili. That's the important. The other part of this also is that that entire area is also, there's a lot of oil traffic which passes through that. Please remember that at the end of the day, yes, the chip is the new oil. This thing of this particular generation, of this particular decade. But oil will never lose its relevance. Therefore, the oil trade, the oil shipment, the oil traffic through tankers, this we need to control that. We need to establish a sense of having a grip on all that. And a lot of those routes, even some of the routes which are coming, let's say from Russia, from other places, passing through here and going to other places, all that passes through this particular area. And that's why you need a very strong naval presence. You need a very strong transshipment hub in this region. That's the other big reason why we are developing the Great Nicobar project. And therefore, come to the other point, which, as I said, this was making good news, but it's also making bad news in the sense that, as usual, and I don't want to get into the politics, so we all know the politician. There are these two prominent politicians who have jumped into it, opposing the project, that no, this will destroy the ecosystem of that particular region. Now, let's talk a little bit about that ecosystem. Yes, there is some truth in the fact that there is a 300 member. They are called the Shampan tribe, which are there in the Great Nicobar Island, and it does probably have a very fragile coral reefs. These projects. Now, we automatically assume that if development takes place, then all these things will be affected badly. The coral reefs will disappear, the ecosystem will be disturbed, the exclusivity of the, for instance, of the 300 member Champagne tribe will be badly affected. We automatically assume these things, and they're important. Certainly not for a moment saying that we should turn a blind eye to these concerns. Of course, we should. They're extremely important. The ecological balance in our scheme of things is also very, very important. But here's the thing. We are talking of 300 members of a Champagne tribe as compared to the aspirations of 1.4 billion people. And this is not a question of 300 versus 1.4 billion. That's not the point. Whenever ecologically sensitive area, culturally sensitive areas, whenever ecologically fragile areas are developed, then obviously, as much as possible, the intention should be to preserve the strengths of that ecological balance. You can still do your development along with that, but you can preserve that also, and at the same time, create shelters, ecosystems, good habitats for the indigenous population of those particular areas. I see no reason why these two projects cannot go hand in hand. And when people say it's either or, that means if you bring in development or you bring in civilian infrastructure, you bring in military infrastructure, then all this will be wiped out. I don't agree with that. Both things can coexist, because this project, as I've explained before, is extremely critical to India's security, but more than security, also to our projection as a great power, as a great maritime power. As I said, our version of the Monroe Doctrine. So both things can go hand in hand, and therefore politicians, especially within our country, do a disservice when they oppose these projects without even thinking. Or maybe they are thinking, or as some people allege, some of these politicians are in the play of foreign intelligence agency, foreign governments. I don't know about that. I don't want to get into that because I have no proof of these things. But without thinking, you straight away jump into it. And why we need to be cautious about this thing is because in the past, So many of our projects, especially related to mining, for instance, have been stopped by this environmental concerns, have been stopped by court action, and all that can happen again also. There's a possibility all that can happen in the Great Nicobar project also. And that is why we need to be very, very careful. But we need also to be determined at the same time that the project has to go through, irrespective of whoever opposes it or doesn't oppose it, because it is critical for the well-being of the country as a whole. And that's the important thing. And lastly, the point which I'm making is that today we saw that, especially in last year, till last year, we were saying that in the name of environmental protection, in the name of the environment, so many political projects are being carried out by vested interests all over the world. We have seen that it is happening. It is This playbook has been happening again and again. Environmental concerns for the sake of environmental is no longer there. It is always, now hand in glove. It is dovetailed with political considerations, with extraneous considerations which have nothing to do with the project really. It is also a way of establishing foreign supremacy over the decision making process of an aspiring country like India. Because please remember, we are not only a developing country, we are also an aspiring country. And therefore, it puts the fetters, it curtails the aspiration of a country like India, where you want to project your power, you want to get powerful, but at the same time, you want to project your power. All that goes out of the window when, in the name of environment, when the name of ecological concerns, these are basically ploys, these are basically tactics, these are basically stratagems which people in, as I said, they could be in the pay of foreign forces. I don't know about that. But these forces then advance and they make sure that they checkmate and they put all this activity and everything, all this just remains a project only on paper and never gets carried out. That is the danger. That is the danger. So, the Great Nicobar project, just to sum it up finally, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for India to make its mark as a great maritime power. It is our version of the Monroe Doctrine, but it is also, there is a red light which is flashing out there. It is, as a time comes to carry out this project, believe you me, it's not only two or three politicians who are speaking out against a project. A number of voices, not only within India but from outside India, will start coming out in opposition to this project. All kinds of roadblocks are going to be put in your way before you carry out this project. That is what we need to be very, very careful of. And that can only be done if you have the political will, if you have that inner strength, and you have the guts and the gumption that we will go ahead with this project come what may. Only that will happen. Please remember Sardar Sarovar project. So many roadblocks are put to the project, and look at the boon now. Look at the benefits of that project all over to Gujarat and the entire system around that. So this is the challenge. It's a challenge, but it is also, as I said, an opportunity for us. This is what's the Great Nicobar project, and this could be actually India's arrival moment on the world stage as a great power, as a great maritime power. So, on this note, I come to the end of this particular podcast. I hope you like this podcast. You like the show. Do subscribe to it. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.